If you thought that the only reason Porsche would be in the news this week was because of a Taycan flying through a showroom window in Russia, you'd be wrong. That's because Porsche finally answered the cries of thousands, maybe even millions of enthusiasts around the world by revealing the all-new 911 992 variant GT3. I know I've personally been waiting desperately for this car to come out, and it has nothing to do with the fact that I want the 991 values to drop just a little bit more. But aside from that, this car is going to bring to the table many new firsts to Porsche's road-going GT cars, and as a result, it's going to leapfrog this generation of GT3 into new heights of performance. You're watching Velocity Crew, and today we're taking a quick look at the all-new Porsche 911 992 GT3. As always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to see more content from us in the future. And with that, let's get to the video. The GT3 badge has always carried significant weight behind it, mostly to indicate that the car in question was intended to be more track-oriented, and it was no regular 911. And to date, there's been 3 different GT3s: the 996, the 997, and most recently, the 991. Each one is known and loved independently for different competencies, but the point is, these cars have always been the enthusiast's dream and the perfect blend of daily usable yet a track-oriented 911 for the road. There were more hardcore variants of each model with an RS badge that were created, but since the 992 RS hasn't yet come out, we'll leave that overview for another time. So then, on to the 992 GT3. What's changed with this car and what makes it so special? Well, let's start with the exterior, which, apart from maybe the door panels, doesn't seem to have any shared parts with a standard 911. Most prominently, we've entered the era of Big Aero. Say that fast 10 times. Now, the all-new swan neck rear wing is, well, massive, and it shows that they're really into the functional aerodynamics with simultaneously less drag versus some artificially flared out and aggressive design. You might recognize the spoiler design from cars like the McLaren Senna and the Senna GTR. 2 hypercars purpose-built for heavy aero and track performance. Like I said, the trick with this type of spoiler is that it creates downforce but reduces drag. This is proper race car tech. One of the other major performance improvements that have come to this car, and for the first time in any road-going 911, is a true double wishbone front suspension setup. So the 911s have always had a McPherson strut front suspension, and the remainder of the 911 992 range keeps this setup, but the GT3 shares the same suspension setup as the 991 RSR race car. And really the impressive part here is the fact that they were able to incorporate this type of suspension in, which has dramatic performance improvements, which we'll talk about here in a moment, but there has been no compromise in front storage space. Because again, it has to be a usable car. So somehow they've used their engineering mastery to make this happen on a road-going 911. And to keep to the theme of the front end, it actually has now different air inlets on the bonnet or the hood, and the lower half of the front bumper looks awfully similar to the new 911 Cup car that they just announced. As far as the rear of the car, the diffuser is a lot more aggressive than the outgoing GT3, and it is said that in the most aggressive wing setting, as well as in combination with the new rear diffuser, you can generate up to 150% more downforce in this car. So the interesting thing is this car actually utilizes a lot of tech from the outgoing GT3 RS, like polycarbonate glass, a carbon fiber bonnet, and other lighter materials used throughout. In fact, it remains the same weight as the 991 GT3 RS at 3,100 pounds. So, speaking of technology that was borrowed from the prior generation car, the 992 GT3 sports a 4-liter naturally aspirated flat 6, and essentially this is the motor that was pulled straight out of the 2019 Speedster that was announced. And this Boxer motor, it's a little different though, because it does get new pistons, a dry sump lubrication system, and independent throttle bodies for each cylinder. So Porsche says it's going to have extremely sharp throttle response, it's going to rev up to 9,000 RPM, and the tach inside of the car actually goes up to 10,000 RPM, which is pretty cool. And it's going to make 502 horsepower and 346 pounds-feet of torque. And as for transmissions, we do get the option of two once again. A 7-speed dual-clutch PDK, which is essentially pulled straight out of the 991 GT3, and we also are able to opt in a special order format for a 6-speed manual. So the 6-speed lives to tell another tale. So far, Porsche has only previewed what the car sounds like shifting with the PDK gearbox, and they've also mentioned that there are new particle filters inside the exhaust, which may deaden some of the note, and I know that there's some folks online saying that that's the case, but I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem because, well, just listen to this thing. Moving towards the interior of the GT3, you'll find that it pretty much looks the same as all the other 992 Carreras. However, there's a couple specific things that the keen eye will notice. First and foremost is that the PDK gear selector, it kind of looks like a manual gear stick, and it's actually a big departure from the standard 992 gear selector, and this is primarily because you need something like a physical gear stock to actually select the gear in the 7-speed PDK gearbox. It's not a electronic gear selector similar to like the little tab you get on the 992. And on top of an 18-way sport seat option, you can opt for full carbon fiber bucket seats, just like you could with prior GT3 generations. Now, this does save you an extra 26 pounds, which will come with a price. And we're still not looking at the most practical car in the world here, even though it's still intended to be a 911. There are no rear seats. And so apart from that, the interior really just has a couple other minor changes. So obviously you'll have a few GT3 badges on your instrument cluster. Apparently the steering wheel is also just ever so slightly smaller, and there's also a GT3 specific track screen function for the instrument cluster, so it's really catered towards track driving. Throw in some Alcantara suede inserts and you've pretty much got yourself a GT3 interior. So, something that struck me as interesting about the new 992 GT3 though, is how Porsche is marketing it. The main introductory video that they released is called "Time is Precious." In the thumbnail, they say "Carpe secundum," seize every second. And even in the video description, they talk about, again, the equipment that's on board this new GT3, and at the end they say, it's proof that every second counts. Hashtag time is precious. And Porsche flexing on us with its 989,000 subscribers. We'll get there soon, Velocity Crew. Bear with me. So being that I'm pretty curious here, I started to think, every second counts. Well, maybe they're talking about this will get you to the grocery store quicker, but well, the horsepower really hasn't changed much, and the top speed hasn't changed, and the 0 to 60 is more or less pretty similar to what you got in the 991 GT3. So time is precious. My only guess is that has to translate to the racetrack. And spoiler alert, it does translate to the racetrack. It translates really well. Like, I'm talking, it Google translates to the racetrack. Because, well, there's really no light way of putting it. This GT3 lapped the Nurburgring in less than 7 minutes. So let's talk about that. Now, I'm not going to get into all the details of why the Nurburgring is such a significant proving ground for most major sports car manufacturers, but I will say that this is no joke of a racetrack. And for those of you who are not familiar, just Google Nurburgring and you'll learn something about it. There are plenty of videos out there. In fact, I drove the Nurburgring and I made a very terrible video. I'll link it in somewhere on this screen. But anyway, even in racing, a second is a long time. So the fact that this 992 GT3 beat its predecessor, the 991 GT3, by 17 seconds, and as a result set a sub 7-minute Nürburgring lap time. I mean, this is unheard of. Like in racing, I mean, that's like, I don't know, a good comparison, but 17 seconds is like an eternity in racing, right? To give you some perspective, because you know I'm all about perspective, the 918 Spider lapped the Nürburgring in 6 minutes and 57 seconds. The prior generation GT3 RS lapped the Nürburgring in 6 minutes and 56 seconds. So this even beat the prior generation RS. It's an absolute monster. Now you may be wondering, Velocity Crew, how is it possible that they shaved 17 seconds off of a Nürburgring lap time with less horsepower and essentially a cheaper car? How is that possible? Well, my dear Watson, it's quite elementary. I'll give you a hint. It has something to do with a swan. More specifically, a swan neck rear spoiler. We were making fun of that big wing, but it turns out when you combine it with the all-new diffuser and you end up getting that 150% increased downforce, that equates to 850 pounds of downforce, which, just to give you perspective, is the same or roughly the same as the last generation GT3 RS. It is also 500 pounds more than you got from the prior 991 GT3. So when you combine that with the all-new double wishbone suspension, the wider track, the bigger brakes, all of that combined makes a huge difference on the track. Because if you notice, the physical performance of the car, it's almost identical. All of those 17 seconds are made up for in the suspension, in the aerodynamics of the car, and the mechanical grip. It's quite an amazing jump, and it really does bring this car into proper supercar and hypercar territory. Kudos to you, Porsche. Wow. So the 992, huh? I don't know, guys. This one is pretty awesome. I have to say I'm pretty excited to see it come out. And again, my excitement, it's one for the automotive community as a whole, but I kind of want to get a 991. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens to that market. But jokes aside, I think they've really put together an incredible package here. So just to summarize here, the 2022 992 GT3, it's supposed to be coming out late fall 2021. They're actually coming out with the online configurator here in spring, so we'll be able to put together some specs. MSRP hasn't been officially announced, but Motor Trend is estimating 170,000 base MSRP, which that's about a 30,000 increase over what the 991 GT3 was. So the performance seems to definitely warrant it, but we'll have to wait and see. And that effectively concludes today's video. So what do you guys think? Leave some comments below on what you think about the styling of the new GT3, and what do you think about the new Nürburgring time? I mean, that was pretty much the most shocking piece of information that was revealed regarding this car, at least in my eyes. If you guys learned something from this video or otherwise enjoyed it, leaving a thumbs up lets me know that. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to do so. So I really want to thank everyone again for all their support, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace!